Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Podcast by Soccer Files. My name is Kevin.
And I'm Connor. We are continuing our group-by-group preview of Euro 2020. And within that, our team-by-team overview as well. We will do an overview of players, but we are considering a deeper dive podcast into that.
That's right. So a pretty superficial look at players in this podcast. Tell me about the jersey you're wearing, Connor.
Today, I'm representing my hometown team, FC Edmonton.
Great. And I'm trying not to be biased. I have a kind of a hobby collecting international soccer jerseys. Today, I am wearing Brazil.
No bias there, given we're talking about the European Championship. So I think you're good.
Exactly. So we're dividing the podcast here into three parts. So part one, we'll begin with an overview of the groups. So we're going to look at the rankings, the head-to-head records, the odds, and just kind of orient you to the country, where it is in Europe and the size. What's part two, Connor?
Part two, we're going to do our team-by-team overview. So this will be the largest section. We're going to look at the long history, the recent history, their qualifying record, their recent results, and here we'll get into the brief overview of the players.
Great. And then part three will be more of a discussion format where we discuss the prospects of each of the teams in the group and predictions. So let's go to part one, an overview based on an overview of the teams, rankings and stuff like that. Why don't you take it away there, Connor?
Sure. So today we're talking about Group B. Group B of Euro 2020 has Belgium, Russia, Denmark, and Finland. So Belgium entered the tournament as the highest ranked team in Europe. The World Cup semifinalists from 2018 breezed through qualifying, and we'll be hoping that this is the year their golden generation can finally lift the trophy. Russia are competing in their fifth straight European Championships. They will be hoping to prove that their run to the quarterfinals in the 2018 World Cup was down to more than just home field advantage. I'm not so sure about that, but we'll discuss it.
All right. And the third team is Denmark, or the pot three team. Past winners of this tournament, actually, but they failed to qualify for two of the past three Euros. But they come into this tournament in good form after an undefeated qualifying campaign. And finally, Finland are competing in their first major tournament in their entire history. So just being here is a huge accomplishment. Can they surprise like Iceland did in their inaugural tournament in 2016 when they reached the quarterfinals? I don't know, Connor, if they'll do as well as that.
We'll see.
Okay, let us go to a look at the FIFA rankings here.
Yeah, I'll talk about the FIFA and the ELO rankings. We described the difference between the two ranking systems in our first podcast, so I won't get into that again here. But really, they are just two different systems for ranking teams. Both use formulas and award points based on actual results. One is the official version used by FIFA, and the other one, ELO, is not an official system, but it's proven itself to be quite accurate.
Yeah, I feel more accurate than FIFA, and I got to get used to calling it ELO because I've been calling it ELO.
Yes, named after Hungarian mathematician Arpad Elo. There's your trivia.
There we go. Thank you. All right, let's take a look at the teams then.
So in terms of world rankings, Belgium are the #1 ranked team in the world by FIFA. This is a position they've held for over 2 years.
What? They haven't won a tournament?
I know. They've got to the quarterfinals and semifinals, but they're still ranked 1 overall. And ELO ranking system has them 2nd overall behind Brazil. But again, that means they're the highest ranked European side, according to that system as well. So a lot of faith or maybe pressure on the Belgians.
Great. How about Russia?
Russia are 39th in the world according to FIFA, 37th according to ELO, so they're pretty similar. Russia rose from a low of 70th in the FIFA rankings just before the 2018 World Cup. So there wasn't a lot of optimism for them there. The ELO rankings, which fluctuate a little bit less, had them in 44th before the World Cup. So they've risen in both systems a little bit in the past couple years.
They have, but they were ninth in December 2012, ninth in FIFA, and 11th in ELO.
Yeah, that was a real high point, which we'll discuss a little bit later.
All right, tell us about Denmark.
Denmark are 12th in FIFA rankings and 13th in ELO, so they're ranked very highly by both systems. Because the seedings for the Euro championships were based on qualification records, though, and Russia collected more points than Denmark in Euro 2020 qualifying, Denmark actually enters a pot 3 team, even though they're ranked some 25 places higher than Russia by both systems. So just a little quirk of how UEFA decided to put teams into pots for this tournament.
But we will, sorry to interrupt you there, we will talk about which one we think is the stronger team.
Absolutely.
Just like Russia, though, they're 12th now. They were 46th in December 2016, but in June 2012, they were 9th. So a lot of up and down there.
Yeah, very much.
Okay, let's look at Finland.
So Finland are 54th in the world according to FIFA, but they're a little bit higher. They're 40th according to ELO. Despite that, they're still among the lowest ranked teams in the tournament. FIFA has them as the second lowest ranked team coming into the tournament. They're the 4th lowest team according to ELO.
Right, and they were actually below 108 in just 2017.
Yeah, historically, not a team that's done very well in these tournaments or in qualifying. Interestingly, though, they're just 15 places lower than Russia in the FIFA rankings, but only 3 below them in ELO. That's 37th and 44th, or in 40th,
really?
sorry. So ELO actually has them as quite close together.
Okay, well, that'll be good to get into in a bit more detail later. I'm going to take us through the head-to-head records amongst the teams. So Belgium and Russia. I'll move the graphic up to there. You can see Belgium and Russia. Well, because Russia is fairly new, they used to be USSR. It's only since 1990 that their record goes. So that's all we'll look at here. They met in the 2002 World Cup group stage, where Belgium won there in Japan. And they met in the 2014 World Cup group stage, where Belgium won. And in 2020, they just met each other in qualifying for this tournament. Belgium won both games, but they were the only 2 games that Russia dropped points in. Anything to add there, or shall I forge on?
Yeah, the omens are looking good for Belgium. They've a perfect 4-0-0 record against the Russians. Is looking good for them.
Right. If we jump down the page a bit, though, surprisingly, Denmark has has the winning record over Belgium. But they haven't played each other since 1996. So when we look at the history, we'll see Belgium wasn't always the strong team that they are now. And also, interestingly, if we go back up to Finland, Finland has a decent record against Belgium. Belgium is ahead, but the last time they met was in 2008. And Belgium lost the first game and tied the second. So Finland has in a sense, the better of them in the recent head-to-head.
Yeah, that's somewhat surprising given the discrepancy between the teams in the rankings. 2008 was not so long ago.
No, it wasn't. So Finland can surprise. I'm going to call them a spoiler team as we go on here. Russia and Denmark have never met, actually, but Russia has a 4-0-0 record over Finland. The last time they met was in 2010, and Russia won both games 3-0. The last one to compare is just Denmark and Finland. They met in 1988. Not much to talk about there. Okay, do you want to comment on that, or should we move on to the odds?
Yeah, I'll talk about the odds.
Okay.
The odds makers really have a clear order in this group, and they tend to be in agreement with the rankings. Belgium are heavy favorites to win this group. Denmark seem to be clear second favorites. Russia third, and then Finland are really given just an outside chance of topping the group.
Yeah, and we should make it clear that these odds are based on the group winners rather than who's going to pass the group.
That's right.
So they all have a chance of passing the group, even if the odds are kind of look like they're against them here. Let's move on to the next section, which is taking a look at each of the countries and familiarizing ourselves a little bit. Do you want to tell us a bit about Belgium, Connor?
Yeah, so Belgium has a population of just 11.6 million people. So it's really a remarkable achievement for them to be ranked first in the world, given that they have a really small population to draw on. And especially when you compare them to Brazil, France, England, Spain, Mexico, some of the other top teams there, Belgium do not have a large population compared to those other countries.
Mm-hmm. They've kind of done it before. They had a really strong period in the last century. They seem to sometimes rise up with just amazing players.
Yeah, certainly they have a strong team now.
Nickname is the Red Devils. Is that a familiar name to you?
It is, not just because it's the same nickname for Manchester United, but their fans will wear devil horns in the stadium. I'm not sure how many fans will get to the stadiums, but look out for their Red Devil Army.
That's great. Yeah, not every team actually has a recognizable nickname, but this is one where you will hear it in the broadcasts and stuff. How about Russia?
Russia, of course, the biggest country in Europe in terms of size, but also in terms of population. They have 146 million people, which is the 9th largest population in the world, and by far the largest of all UEFA teams. So they're the big fish in the pond, kind of in UEFA and certainly in this group.
Yeah, it's hard to say with Russia because it's kind of half in Europe and half in Asia. So, I mean, fairly, if we kind of divide that population by about half, it puts it into perspective with other countries. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say so. Most of the population lives on the European side, and Moscow is one of the biggest cities in all of Europe. Population of about 8 million is not that far off what all of Belgium is.
Wow. How about Denmark?
I'll talk about Denmark and Finland together just because they're very similar in size. They both have between 5.5 and 6 million people. Despite their similarity, though, Denmark have been quite significant players on the world soccer stage, whereas Finland, have been invisible for a lot of their history. So they're the two smallest countries in this group. Denmark certainly is punched above their weight. But not too far off Belgium. But yeah, just under 6 million people is pretty small population to be drawing on for their national team.
Yeah, the size of the country can be a bit deceptive, both on the map and in the numbers there. But a lot of it is just northern territory where few people live. Let's take a look at the names. We kind of passed that by, but I don't really feel Russia, Denmark, or Finland have recognizable nicknames. Russia goes with "our guys" or the national team. I can't read the Cyrillic. Have you heard of that before?
Not so much, to be honest.
No, and Denmark, the red and white, Danish Dynamite, the Olsen Banden or the Olsen Gang. Is that familiar to you?
A little bit less so, but you'll see their fans in the stadiums, red and white, a red and white wall. You'll see.
Yeah, that's true. And then Finland is nicknamed the Eagle Owls. I don't dare pronounce it in Finnish.
I won't either. We'll leave it be for the Finns.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to move on to the names, or have you finished with that section?
Yeah, let's move on to the next section.
Okay, this is part 2 then, the team by team history. So we're going to start with Belgium here. And I don't think the graphic, if this is a podcast that you're listening to, none of the graphics are really important. It's just kind of a visual to look at if you happen to be looking at a video version. You can't really read the graphic, but really the important thing is the red and the green and blue is just kind of in the middle there. So if it's all green, they're doing well. If it's all red, that means they didn't qualify that much. Okay, let's take a look at Belgium. They're among the most senior of teams, having been one of the 4 European teams to travel to Uruguay for that first World Cup, traveling by boat. They've entered every cup except for 1950, the one after the war, when they withdrew. And they didn't enter the first Euro Cup either in 1960, but they participated every time since. So looking specifically at the World Cup, peculiarly, when they've done well in World Cup play, they haven't in Euro Cup. And the reverse is also true, until recently anyway. And generally, their record is weaker in the Euro Cup, though their best results in the 1970s were never matched by World Cup play, where reaching the group stage in 1970 was their best result until recent times. Yeah, as I said, that World Cup success was followed up. That Euro success was followed up by a longer stretch of good strength on the global stage. So we'll take a look at that a little bit. But you can kind of see there by the patch of red up to 1978, and then a patch of green after 1982. So Belgium qualified for each of the 3 first World Cups, the first 3 World Cups, I should say, but they never got past the first round there. From 1950 to 1980, they only qualified twice, in 1954 and 1970. And again, they didn't get past the first round. But from 1982, they were consistent qualifiers, reaching it an impressive 6 times in a row. And even more impressively, they reached the second round 5 of those times. The 2006 World Cup broke that qualifying streak, and they failed again as recently as 2010 before returning with an impressive squad and a quarterfinal finish in 2014. And then, as you've mentioned before, they came 3rd in 2018, which outdid their best finish up to that point, which was 4th place in 1986. Do you want to take a look at the more recent history a bit closer, Connor?
Yeah, so in the World Cup, 2014 marked their first World Cup appearance after missing out on the previous 2 events. They won all 3 group stage games to top their group, relied on a pair of extra time goals to beat the United States in the round of 16, and then lost to finalist Argentina in the quarterfinals. 2018 was even better for them. They again won all 3 group stage games, including against England. In the round of 16, they fell 2-0 down to Japan, but staged a remarkable 25-minute comeback to win 3-2. They even hit a 94th minute winner, and it was really one of the most sensational games of the tournament. Do you remember that, Kevin?
Oh, absolutely. That was incredible. I gotta say, I don't mind Belgium, but I was pulling for Japan, so it was a bit of heartbreak for me there.
Yeah, heartbreak for Japan indeed. However, they got through, and then they had an impressive win against Brazil following that. They got to the semifinals where they met France. They lost there, and of course, France will go on to win the tournament.
Right. When they got past Brazil, it looked like they were going to go all the way, but alas, they didn't. Okay, let's move on to Euro Cup then. The record is actually much weaker in the Euro Cup. However, their best period filled a gap where they were failing to qualify for the World Cup. So despite not reaching the 1974 and 78 World Cups, they finished third in Euro 1972 and second in Euro 1980. Beyond that, until 2016 at least, they only reached the Cup twice, in 1984 and then when they co-hosted in 2000, and failed to pass the group stage in each case, even when they hosted. Their long absence from the Cup was finally redressed with a convincing qualification in 2016, but the quarterfinal finish was seen as a bit of a disappointment since their impressive squad only had a few moments of brilliance and fell to Wales, who had also bested them in qualification.
Yeah, Belgium really weren't at their best in Euro 2016, despite the high expectations. They lost to Italy in their opening match, and then they needed a late goal to beat Sweden to ensure a second-place finish in the group. They brushed aside Hungary in their first knockout match, winning 4-0, but then, as you said, Kevin, they were upset by Wales 3-1 in the quarterfinals, when it seemed on the face of it that they got a very favorable draw to go to the semifinals. They took the lead in that game, but then Wales scored 3 unanswered. It was, again, a remarkable game involving Belgium.
Yeah, well, it's not that we don't like Belgium, but when they come up against Wales, we're pretty clear where our loyalties lie.
That's right.
Okay, just a few comments then. 2014 then marked a real turning point for Belgium as they changed from a weak team that had not qualified for a cup since 2002 to one that reached a quarterfinal or better in 3 tournaments. Of course, their first place ranking, putting that expectation on them now. And all of this is a result, this recent strength is a result of a really strong generation that many felt were talented enough to dominate the world stage and still feel that way. Indeed, the general consensus was that the quarterfinal finishes were underperformances for that squad, and a 3rd place finish in 2018 came closer to justifying their talent.
Yeah, I would agree with those comments. You wonder if the pressure of being number 1 really added to them, because historically the quarterfinal finishes for them were quite good, but people expected them to go further because they were ranked so high. Like you said, they did prove themselves to be among the top teams with a 3rd place finish in 2018, and they do seem to merit that 1st place ranking. But for them, the challenge is with this golden generation of talented players that they have is to go on and actually win one of these tournaments.
Well, I think it's more possible now. I mean, that generation is kind of hitting their prime in their late 20s. And, maybe in their early 20s, it was a lot of pressure for them. But they've been around for quite a while now, guys like Kevin De Bruyne and Eden Hazard, or Hazard, I think I should say. Okay, well, let's move on then to... sorry, I haven't been good with the graphics, but you can see by that Euro Cup at a glance, there's a lot more red in there, not so much green. But let's go to their recent history, their qualification for this tournament. Basically, that is all green. They won every game. The main competition there was Russia, who they meet here, and then Scotland, Cyprus, Kazakhstan, and San Marino. Do you want to take... Oh, yeah, sorry, go.
Yeah, I'll just look at their recent games in the Nations League and 2022 qualifying, which has already begun for the World Cup. Belgium are in the top tier in the Nations League. They missed out on 1st place in 2018-19 in the Nations League on goal difference, but they fixed that problem in 2020/2021 when they won their Nations League group convincingly, ahead of England and actually ahead of current group mates Denmark, who they beat twice. In World Cup 2022 play, they again met old nemesis Wales, but they beat them along with Belarus at home, winning the latter game 8-0.
Yeah.
But then they tied Czech Republic away. So they currently stand first in their group. Overall, you have to say there's very few blemishes on their recent record and that they go into this tournament in quite fine form.
Yeah, even that tie in Czech Republic is a bit uncharacteristic of them, because I think that first place ranking they have is really due to their consistency.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But I think Wales is going to get them again.
Any comments on players? You mentioned a few already.
Yeah, let's take a look at their scorers in the sorry, this is 2020 Euro Cup qualifying, and Romelu Lukaku is their highest scorer, and no surprise that Eden Hazard is second, but a real wider range of scorers there, with their big names represented quite well, including Thorgan Hazard, which I'm not sure a lot of people are aware of, Eden's brother, but he's actually becoming a bigger name on the team.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, lots of different scores with for Belgium. Even though Eden Hazard has not been in the best form for Real Madrid, he's had a lot of injuries this season. They just have so many top players to choose from. Lukaku, De Bruyne, Batshuayi, Benteke.
Really an embarrassment of riches there. And, I think a couple of, is it Thomas Vermaelen who's getting close to retirement age, and Christian Benteke, maybe aging, although he was good at the end of the recent season. But they are kind of getting older there.
Yeah, like we've mentioned, it's a bit of a golden generation for Belgium. Some players are coming into their prime. Some players, this may be their last tournament, so they'll really want to do well and again make the most of the talent that they have.
Yeah, the list for the 2022 scorers is actually fairly well developed because of that 8-0 win. Leandro Trossard coming into the mix there from Brighton.
Yeah, it just shows the depth they have.
Yeah, and I think the fact you said Eden Hazard is hasn't been great this year, and he isn't represented on that list yet.
Yeah, a couple injuries for him. We'll see what kind of role he plays in the upcoming Euros.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that is the end of Belgium, and let's move on to Russia. Okay, so Russia, of course, before 1990 was the USSR, and so we kind of have to divide that into two sections. The USSR, which started qualifying in 1958 and went all the way to 1990, and then Russia, which is a much smaller than USSR. In fact, a lot of the USSR's best players came from outside of Russia, especially the Ukraine. And so we could expect the USSR to have been a stronger team than Russia. The well they had to draw from for players is evident in the fact that the former USSR has become 15 separate teams by 2006, and their best players often came from the Ukraine, even more than from Russia itself. They went through a little period of being called the CIS, the Commonwealth of Independent States. They only played one Euro Cup under that name before breaking up into individual teams, and now the core of the Soviet Union plays as Russia. So they were a top team from the 1950s to the 1990s, which I think a lot of people kind of overlook. Although they had a poor spell for around 10 years in the 1980s, They didn't enter the World Cup until 1958, but then they stormed onto the scene with good results in their first World Cups and in their Euro Cups. So they reached all of the World Cups except for 1974 and 1978, where they respectively were disqualified in 1974 for refusing to play an intercontinental playoff game in Chile, which was kind of politically tumultuous at the time. And then in 1978, they were knocked out by Hungary. From 1956 to 70, they reached the quarterfinals of the World Cup 4 times in a row, and they took 4th place in England in 1966, which was their best result. And then following that absence in the mid-70s, they continued to pass the group stage, and 1990 was the only time they failed to pass the group stage. As Russia, they were unable to do so, that is, past the group stage, until they hosted in 2018. Even when they had easy opponents in the group stages in 2002 and 2014. But even getting that far was a problem. And they fell at the UEFA playoff in 1998 to Italy and 2010 to, Connor, do you know?
To Slovenia. That was quite an upset.
Yeah, 2002 was their only really convincing qualifying campaign, and they were bested by Slovenia even in that tournament. So a bit of a history with Slovenia there, but their consistency saw them finishing first in 2002. 2006 was the worst beginning, with a home tie against Slovakia, and then they were pounded 7-1 by Portugal. And even though they improved, they finished 3rd for their worst qualification result. That was 2006. But they eventually reached the quarterfinal in 2018, but may not be a representative result of their true strength, Connor?
Yeah, it might not be. As you mentioned, as Russia, just getting to the World Cup seemed to be a success in itself. Wins against Cameroon and Tunisia were all they managed in World Cups as Russia between 1994 and 2014, that from 3 different tournaments. In 2018, of course, though, they exceeded expectations as the host nation, benefiting from that home field advantage. They advanced to the round of 16, where they were drawn against Spain, which kind of killed any hopes of any further advancement. But incredibly, they took the Spaniards to penalties in their national stadium in Moscow and converted all of their spot kicks to advance to the quarterfinals. There they met Croatia, and again, they went to penalties. However, this time they missed twice, so bowed out at that stage, and Croatia would, of course, go on to the final. But it has to be said, a really good tournament for them that I think exceeded expectations. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you showed earlier that they are around 70th in the FIFA rankings coming into that tournament. So they were very nervous. And as I recall, the Confederations Cup, which was played a year earlier, kind of a warm-up to the World Cup, I don't think they got past the group stage in that cup. So they were quite nervous.
No, they didn't. And that was that just ratcheted up the pressure and the nerves even more.
Yeah, so a big sigh of relief once they passed the group stage there. But beating Spain, that's quite an achievement. A lot of the Spanish dynasty was still there.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at the Euro Cup history, which is actually quite impressive. They won the first one, the USSR did. And then they went on to reach the semi-finals 3 more times until 1972. Taking second place twice in 1964 and 1972. After that, they failed to qualify 3 times in a row, but then took second place again in 1988, which was their last entry as USSR. And then kind of trying to reorganize the country after the fall of the Soviet Union. As CIS, but it doesn't really bear much mention as they didn't pass the group stage. Russia hasn't maintained that strong USSR record, even from their first entry in 1966. They regularly reach the cup, failing only in 2000, but have passed the group stage only once in 2008. Very good year, 2008, where they knocked England out of qualifying, and then they halted juggernaut Netherlands, who looked like they were going to win it all. But they beat them and reached the semi-finals. But after that, they failed to pass the group stage in the following two editions. Any comment on the Euro Cup there?
Yeah, 2008 really was more of an exception. They had quite a strong team then, and good results through qualifying, through the tournament, getting to the last four. In Euro 2012, they got off to a really good start by beating Czech Republic 4-1 in their opening match. But that was hardly a sign of things to come. They crashed out in the group stage after drawing Poland and losing to Greece, while the Czech Republic recovered to top the group. So it was kind of a strange result to start the group off.
Yeah. Yeah, in 2016, they also started poorly. They tied Moldova at home. And then they fired their manager, Fabio Capello, after losing to Austria in their next game at home. Usually they're very strong at home, so those poor results at home cost Capello his job.
Yeah, they would actually tie Capello's former team, England, in their opening game of Euro 2016, but defeats against Slovakia and Wales condemned them to finish last in their group.
Ooh. Great. Okay, let's just take a step back here and talk about them in general. So 2008, I mentioned as a good year. Several of their players were expanding into Europe. Who was the guy who played for Arsenal?
Andrei Arshavin.
Right, I really liked him. Yeah.
Yeah.
But since then, and they had players all over the place. There was a guy at Tottenham also and elsewhere in Europe. But they've become pretty insular since, and in the 2016 Euro Cup, they had no players playing outside of Russia.
Wow.
And maybe a good way to look at Russia is in terms of home and away records. In general, really strong at home with perfect records in 1996, 98, and 2004. And then they were undefeated in three tournaments between 2006 and 2008. So really strong at home. And again in 2014. Their road record, on the other hand, is sometimes atrocious, tying some really weak teams, which is why their overall result in the qualifications is not that great. So recently they've tied Azerbaijan twice. They've lost to Northern Ireland on the road. And in 2006, I think I mentioned they were humiliated in Portugal with a 7-1 loss, as well as a playoff loss in Slovenia, which cost them the 2010 World Cup.
Yeah, their home form really worked for them in the 2018 World Cup. They're back on the road this time, though. So it'll really be interesting to see whether that 2018 was a bit of a blip, a good blip for them being at home, or whether they can carry any of that momentum forward.
Yeah, that'll be really the story for them, whether that 2018 was just a home advantage, as you mentioned at the beginning. Let's take a look at their qualifying for this tournament, though. It's pretty impressive. Well, pretty impressive, but apart from Belgium, who they lost to twice, they won all games. But that really is, Scotland, Cyprus, Kazakhstan, and San Marino. You would pretty much expect them to win all of those games, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you really would. It certainly wasn't the most difficult group. They did what they needed to. They beat the weak teams, couldn't compete with Belgium, but it was enough for second place.
Yeah. Okay, how about going on to recent matches, Connor?
Yeah, in Nations League play, they did well in 2018-19, almost getting promoted from Group B or from League B to League A, missing out on goal difference. And then they had another second place finish in Group or League B in 2020-21 with a record of 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses. So I think that really establishes them as a second-tier team in Europe.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, League B twice in a row.
Yeah. And then in World Cup 2022 play, they started with a defeat away to Slovakia, but wins against Slovenia and Malta, which are really games they should be winning. Currently has them in second place, tied on points with Croatia.
Right. My graphic here actually says Slovakia. The loss in Slovakia was the third game. Is that right?
It might have been. Yeah, 2 wins and 1 loss is their record, though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we won't dwell on that. But again, that kind of does show their weakness away from home. Slovakia is not a bad team, but if Russia has hopes of being a kind of a top tier team, they need to be winning those kind of games.
Agreed.
Do you want to start us out on the players here? Who are the main names here?
Like you mentioned, the vast majority of Russian players play in their domestic league. Their top goal scorer in qualifying was Artem Zuba. He's a 32-year-old captain. He's 6'6" tall, so he's a handful on the field.
Well, he's a handful off the field too, because I think he was off the team for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's had some disciplinary things, some issues in the past, if I recall. But he's an important player. 9 goals in qualifying for them. 4 of them did come in a single home match against San Marino, so I guess you can take the 9 goals with a bit of a grain of salt.
Yeah, he missed a penalty there too.
Wow, could have had 5.
Yeah.
And then Denis Cheryshev, he really shone in the 2018 World Cup, scoring 4 goals. He chipped in with 5 in Euro qualifying. He's one of the few who plays outside of Russia. He plays with Valencia. And really, Russia will need those 2 players to score if they're to have any chance of getting through, I feel.
Yeah, I think they have had a bit of trouble scoring. If we just take a quick look at the 2022 scorers, we see Zuba is their main man there too. All right.
To Denmark.
Yeah, okay, on to Denmark. Here we go. Denmark, they first entered the World Cup in 1958, and after not entering 1962, they enter consistently from 1966 on. They're more consistent in Euro competitions, having entered the first on every edition after. Is that right? Oh yeah, they were there in the first one. In the early years, they either didn't reach the Cup, but from 1980 onwards, they reached the World Cup about half the time, and the Euro Cup fairly consistently until recent times, at least, where they've missed 2 of the last 3, as you mentioned earlier. Their first successful World Cup qualification was in 1986. Do you remember the goalie there?
I don't. Who was it?
It's Schmeichel. He's still their goalie.
The older Schmeichel with his son now in net. Of course.
That's right. So first successful was in 1986, and the second was in 1998. So 1986 was probably the better performance, where in the group stage they crushed Uruguay 6-1 and beat West Germany as well, winning all 3 matches. But that ended with a heavy 5-1 loss to Spain in the round of 16. So 1998 is their best result, because they reached the quarterfinals there despite an unconvincing group stage. They beat Saudi Arabia and then tied host South Africa and lost to France. But they passed the group stage and beat Nigeria 4-1 before falling to Brazil in the quarterfinals. So though they've only reached the World Cup 5 times, they really made the best of it by passing the group stage 4 times, only failing in 2010. The other 3 times they were knocked out in the round of 16 by Spain in 86, England in 2002, and Croatia in the last World Cup. In qualifying, they started poorly, losing all the games in 1958 and finishing last or second last with only a smattering of wins. In 1986, they came kind of out of the blue. They went undefeated at home and finished first ahead of USSR. Qualifications have remained strong since then, with no more than 2 losses in a campaign, even in years where they didn't qualify. But it was too many draws being the problem for them. In 2002, they went undefeated in qualifying, while 2014 was the weakest performance, winning only 1 game at home.
Yeah, I'll briefly talk about that 2014 World Cup qualification. They finished second in their group behind Italy. At the time, there were 9 groups, and of the 9 second-place finishers, 8 advanced to a playoff. So Denmark were the team to miss out on that, and too many draws was their problem. Only 1 win at home, and a crushing 4-0 home defeat to Armenia. So they missed out just by a hair there, failing to reach the playoffs. In 2018, they were actually technically undefeated in the World Cup against both finalists. They tied France 0-0 in the group stage, and then tied 1-1 with Croatia in the round of 16, and lost on penalties. So some all right performances, but the round of 16 was as far as they got.
Yeah. You mentioned that defeat to Armenia. That they played them after that. They have a bit of an interesting history, but I can't remember exactly what it was. I think they got their revenge. Okay, let's move on to the Euro Cup history, because that's a bit more outstanding here. And I'll just kind of fix up the graphic a little bit there. You can see just by the red that at the beginning it wasn't very impressive. But in general, it's more outstanding than the World Cup. 4th place in 1964, but otherwise they didn't make it to the Cup until 1984. But then they reached the Cup 6 times in a row afterwards until 2008. So undoubtedly their biggest claim to fame was their shocking win of Euro 1992. They hadn't actually even qualified for that cup. They failed to qualify, but they were selected to play when their group winners, Yugoslavia, were disqualified. So they otherwise passed the group stage in 1984 and 2004, but not in their other 3 entries, 2000 being particularly grim, as they lost all 3 games and went home without a goal. Their consistent participation died, though, when they failed to reach the 2008 Cup. And even worse, as I'm sure you'll talk about, failed to reach the expanded Cup in 2016. I'll let you take it from here. I was going to talk about their qualifying runs, but maybe we'll skip that.
Sure. Yeah, they've had some disappointing qualifying runs in recent years, as you mentioned. 2012 is the only tournament they qualified for out of the previous 3. In 2012, they were placed in the proverbial group of death with Germany, Portugal, and the Netherlands. Although they failed to advance from that group, they actually played well. They beat Netherlands and then lost to both Portugal and Germany on late goals. So that was their most recent experience at the European Championships.
Well, I think Hungary will kind of relive that experience for them, because poor Hungary is grouped with Germany, Portugal, and France in this World Cup.
Yikes.
Oh, sorry, in this Euro Cup. Yeah. Okay. Well, whether in success or failure, they've been pretty unremarkable in recent years. With a memorable World Cup stage in 1986 and an unexpected win of the 1992 Euro Cup, they have done not so much of note since, reaching only 3 of the 7 tournaments since 2006. I mean, 3 of the 7 World Cups and Euro Cups. But even when they were there, they were fairly forgettable. And 2016 will kind of hit the bottom, failing to reach the expanded Euro Cup, which teams like Albania and Hungary, kind of weaker teams, reached. However, crushing Ireland in a playoff in 2018 and then passing the group stage for the first time since 2004. Got them off to a kickstart in 2018, and then they had that dramatic loss to Croatia that you talked about. Croatia actually missed a penalty in extra time there. And 2020 Euro qualifying showed really good form. And maybe you can take us through their recent form, Connor.
Yeah, in Nations League play, they moved up from Group B to Group A in their first Nations League tournament, and then actually held their own playing among Europe's elite. They finished behind Belgium, but level on points with England, whom they tied at home and then beat at Wembley. Iceland finished last in that group without a win. For World Cup 2022 qualifying.
Oh, hang on, Connor, can I interrupt you? Because I forgot to do the qualification for this tournament.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so as you can see, we've talked about Denmark's downfall being too many ties. And it wasn't really almost their downfall here. They didn't lose any, but 4 out of 8 ties, that's a bit of a problem. And so even though they bested Switzerland, I guess tying them away and beating them at home, it was Switzerland who won the group. Those ties really costing them a little bit there, Connor.
Yeah, they were. For their 2022 qualifying campaign, they may not have that problem because they managed to be seeded in pot 1. So that gives them a big advantage. They avoided really any of the big teams. And that early promise has so far translated into results. They had a crushing 4-0 win against Austria, an 8-0 win over Moldova, and a 2-0 win away in Israel. So they're in first place and in a really strong position looking at that 2022 World Cup.
Yeah, that last game where they won 4-0 in Austria, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that really set the tone, I think.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at who's getting all these goals. 8-0 in Moldova. Christian Eriksen, of course, the biggest name there. Do you want to talk a little bit about their players?
Yeah, you can't talk about Denmark without talking about Christian Eriksen. A 29-year-old has scored 36 goals from midfield across 106 appearances. And when he's not scoring, he's setting them up. That said, they do have players scattered across the various top leagues in Europe. Worth a mention is Christian Gutkjar, if I've said that right.
I'm not sure how to say it, and I don't want to hurt myself.
Yeah, he scored 4 goals in qualifying. He's 31 years old. He has just 9 appearances, and he plays in the Italian second tier for Monza. Previously, he played for Polish side Lech Poznan. So yeah, kind of a surprise to see him as their second leading goal scorer in qualifying. Given, like I said, they do have players playing in top leagues and on good teams across Europe.
Yeah, I'm just there's one game there that I wanted to take a closer look at. Sorry, I can't bring the information up quickly enough.
I'll just mention too, because we talked about the Schmeichels. Goalkeeper Kasper Schmeichel, who plays for Leicester City. I would say he's in really the elite class of goalkeepers. He's such a reliable presence back there. Can pull off some amazing saves. So, that can be worth a point or 3 potentially in this tournament as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure who that was against, but there was a 3-3 draw there, their first away game, and they got their goals at 84, 88, and 90 plus 3 for a really impressive comeback.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, I should have
I believe that was against Switzerland.
Yeah, I think it was against Switzerland. 3-3 draw. Yes, it was the first game. Okay, let's take a look at the World Cup. They've scored a lot of goals already, just like Belgium have. And we're seeing a few different names there, Connor. Christensen not even on the board.
Yeah, it will benefit them that they have scoring kind of spread out among different players. And if you can get goals without Christensen, that will help them, that depth scoring. They're a fairly well-rounded team. They'll be a difficult team to break down, and they're in good form. Their manager, Kasper Hjulmand, he's won 8 of his 11 games in charge, and he really seems to have the team ticking over nicely.
Yeah, looking good, Denmark. All right, let's move on then to our last team. Hopefully this can be a bit shorter. It is Finland. And as you can see, they've never reached a World Cup. And they nevertheless are one of the older teams in Europe, first entering in 1938 there, and they withdrew during qualification in 1950, but have entered every cup since then. And like the World Cup, they didn't enter the first 2 Euro Cups, but participated consistently since 1968. So they've never qualified for either cup until reaching this Euro Cup in 2020 here. From 1938 to 1970, they finished at the bottom of their World Cup qualifying group, earning the odd draw or win, but often suffering heavy defeats like a 10-0 loss to USSR in 1958. They had a couple of early campaigns where they lost all their games. 1974 started seeing them finishing above some weaker teams like Albania and Luxembourg, but 1986 was really their first competitive campaign. It was a 4th place finish, but it was unlucky considering they were undefeated at home, and they also beat Turkey on the road. So a good year for them, and perhaps they didn't seem like a competitive team at that time. From 1998, they began to consistently turn in more competitive campaigns. 1986 remains their closest, where they were just a point behind second place Hungary. Hungary went on to a playoff, and they even were 1 point ahead of Switzerland that year. They generally finished, though, a distant 3rd after that, so they were never close. 2006 was pretty weak in this period, but they finished 4th in 2018. 2006. Sorry, I'm losing myself here. 2006 was relatively weak in this period, but 2018 was really poor, managing only a distant 5th place behind Turkey. Take the microphone away from me, Connor.
Well, 2018, as you said, was a very, very poor campaign. They won just 2 of 10 games. A road win against Kosovo, who they also tied at home. They did beat group winners Iceland 1-0. But like you said, they finished a distant 5th and were really not competitive. 2014 in the World Cup qualification, prior to that, again, they won just 2 of 8 games, beating Georgia and Belarus once each. So there's no history to talk about in World Cup finals. They've never made it. Qualification, again, a couple signs of improvement, but that 2018 was really disappointing for them.
Yeah. Same with Euro Cup. They've never qualified for a Euro Cup, which forces us to look at their qualifying in order to get a sense of them. It's slightly different, though. They didn't suffer. They almost never suffered a heavy defeat, but they generally finished 4th in the group. This meant last place until 1988. Although in 1980 they had a competitive campaign where they were undefeated at home and finished 3rd ahead of USSR, a disgraced USSR in that case. 1992 saw them again undefeated at home, but only to finish 2nd last. Since then, it has almost always been 4th place, despite a few wins. Although 2008 was fourth place among 8 teams, and they only lost 2 of their 14 games, only 4 points separating them from the winner. And then 2020 was a great performance. I'm sure you'll tell us about that, Connor.
Yeah, 2020 qualifying for this tournament was quite strong. They beat out Greece and Bosnia in their group to reach their first cup. As you mentioned, it's that they can be good at home, and they really qualified on the strength of their home form, where they won 4 of 5 games, posting clean sheets in all of those. The only defeat coming to group winners Italy, who won all 10 games. And then really they did enough on the road, beating Armenia and Liechtenstein to be able to qualify automatically.
Yeah, I was going to do the, or we're scheduled to do the qualifying campaign, but I think you covered it well right there. So let's look at, let's go down and look at their recent history here. No, I do want to say one thing, though, in general. They were a weak team with the exception of the odd campaign. The thing is that when they showed improvement, they would follow that up with another weak campaign. So from 2000, they became more of a middling team. But throughout, and this is the point I'm anxious to make, is that they've always been a spoiler team. So their single win in 1966 was against Spain. And in 1976, their only point was a tie in Italy. It was in the final game, but it actually dragged Italy down into third place. So they didn't reach the cup because of Finland. And this spoiler reputation was especially true in 2002, where they dictated the fortunes of England and Germany by tying them 3 out of 4 games. Yeah, maybe we'll leave it at that for general comments on the team. How about you?
Yeah, not too much to add. They've, like you said, they've been a fairly consistent 3rd or 4th place in Euro qualifying campaigns, which leaves them short. The kind of performance they put in wouldn't have kind of earned them a spot even in the expanded 24 team tournament. However, in Euro 2020, they improved enough that they didn't really need to rely on the expanded tournament. They got there on their own merit.
Yeah, they would have expanded. They would have, with this result that I see before me, would have earned them a berth in the 16-team tournament, I think. Hard to say, though, because the whole structure is different. We pointed out earlier, too, that they're the only team to have the better of Belgium in the new millennium. Okay, well, we'll pass over the 2020 Euro Cup qualifying and look at their more recent matches there. Do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, they performed well in the new Nations League. They came first in 2018-19 in League C, ahead of Hungary, Greece, and Estonia. So that got them promoted to League B. And there they held their own. They finished second in 2020/21, behind Wales, but ahead of Ireland and Bulgaria. And their good performances in the Nations League have really coincided with their qualification campaign for this tournament, which does point towards some general improvement. Looking for the 2022 World Cup, qualifying for that would be really a monumental achievement. They're in a tough group, which includes France, Ukraine, Bosnia, and Kazakhstan. They got a good draw on the road against Ukraine, which followed a home tie against Bosnia. So 2 draws from 2 games. They sit third in the group, but it should be competitive but open.
Yeah, I don't really expect them to finish ahead of Ukraine, but that was a bit of a spoiler result, winning away there.
In terms of players, just briefly, Teemu Pukki, he's the danger man. It's not really a stretch to say that he's carried the team on his back. He scored 10 of their 16 goals in qualification for this tournament. He was actually one of only 5 players in the entire qualification campaign to hit double figures. And then he scored all 3 of their goals in 2022 qualification so far. So no secret where their success lies.
Yeah, and when we get into the prospects, which we're going to get into soon, I think that's really a key point. Well, let's get into that without any delay because we're going a bit long here. Let's look at the 4 teams again. I'll just put them up here and we'll have a little chat about them. Belgium to win the group, Connor?
Yeah, I don't really see any other outcome other than Belgium winning. In fact, I see them probably winning all 3 of their games. And then the question there is how far they can go. And what do you think Belgium would see as success for this tournament?
I don't even think they'd be satisfied really with the semi-finals. I think reaching the final would justify their first place ranking. I see the only real danger for them in the group stage is taking it too lightly.
Yeah, which is a possibility. I mean, you've mentioned even Finland has a good record against them this millennium and can play spoilers. But I think it would be I would still be surprised if they didn't collect 9 points.
Yeah, I mean they have that first place ranking because of their consistency, so it's hard to see them not winning the group, and virtually impossible to see them not going through. Yeah, their tournament really lies in the deeper stages, but I think there's a good battle for second here between Russia and Denmark. Russia did make it further in the 2018 World Cup, but the question is whether that was all down to home advantage.
I do think it was a little bit. I mean, part of home advantage means you're seeded for the World Cup, and they got a fairly easy group with Saudi Arabia and Egypt, Uruguay as well. So this will be a tougher group for them even than the World Cup group, I believe. They come in as a pot 2 team, but they are ranked behind Denmark. And I see Denmark as a stronger team. They've been consistent in getting out of group stages when they've qualified for tournaments. So I think those 2 teams will be fighting for second. Who do you give the edge to?
Yeah, I don't actually see it as that much of a fight, to be honest. I mean, I think it would be kind of an even battle with Denmark in their kind of traditional form, but they're so strong in their recent campaigns that I think it's bad that Russia is even ranked second here. It's really Denmark seems much stronger to me.
Yeah, I would certainly give Denmark the edge there. Do you see Finland playing spoilers, or what role do you see for Finland in their first ever major tournament?
Great question. I feel like Belgium and Denmark are too consistent, but I think they must be targeting Russia as a spoiler result. I don't think they've ever gotten any points from Russia, but yeah, maybe I'm being too cynical about Russia here, but I do see them as possible victim of Finland.
Yeah, Finland are so reliant on one player for scoring. And I think now that they're in the finals tournament, teams will be more aware of it and perhaps more capable of shutting Teemu Pukki down. I agree that Russia could be a victim of a spoiler to their neighbors, Finland, who will want to put in a good performance there. But for Finland, I see maybe a point against Russia, but unfortunately for them, I think 0 points is a more likely outcome.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, in qualifying and stuff, probably some of the teams they face in qualifying can't really shut down Pukki, but teams like Denmark and And Belgium will know that if they shut down, and Russia too, if they shut down that one avenue, that Finland is pretty much cut off from goals.
Yeah.
Finland does have the advantage that some smaller teams like Iceland have, which is, they don't have a huge selection of players to choose from. So they may have an advantage in that their players are really familiar. They be playing more like a club team than an international team, but that's the only hope I can really give them.
Yeah, I agree with that. The odds makers, as we mentioned at the beginning, they were fairly clear in what they saw as possible group winners, ranking them as Belgium, Denmark, Russia, Finland, and it appears that we agree that that's the way this group is likely to go.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that covers our podcast. Do you have anything to add at the end?
No. Yeah, great to discuss Group B. For Denmark, getting through the group, should be what their aim, and then we'll see if they can go further. It may depend on getting a favorable draw, but see how far they can go. I think the quarterfinals would be a really big success for them. And Belgium, they're one of the teams to watch to win it. Like you mentioned, they're probably planning for the later stages, but they can't take this group for too lightly.
Yeah, and I think like in 2018, I think Russia would breathe a sigh of relief to get through the group stage. But it is quite possible with three teams possibly getting through.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for me, and I think we'll wrap it up here on Group B of Euro 2020.
Thank you, Connor. Great.
Thanks, Kevin.